This is the list of FSF-endorsed Linux distros. These are distros that only offer you free software, only have free drivers and firmware, and respect your freedom as defined by the FSF and have various different bases. This is a distro that most people consider a free software distro, but was never officially endorsed by the FSF. There is a very long story behind that, which I've discussed in a previous video. And this is Ubuntu Linux. This is not a free software distro, nor does it claim to be, nor does it want to be. It will happily offer you proprietary software and drivers if that is what you as the user desires. But what if I told you, many moons ago, back in the very early days of Ubuntu, there was a flavor, an official flavor of Ubuntu that at least initially Stallman did think was a good idea, that was a free software version of Ubuntu. This was a very short-lived version, but it did actually exist. Now, the very first version of Ubuntu was Brodie Warthog 4.10. There were some beta releases before that, but the first actual version was Brodie Warthog 4.10. Following this release, come November 24th, 2005, Mark Shuttleworth, the Canonical founder, the CEO then, and still CEO now, posted something onto the mailing list. Now, the title doesn't really make any sense for what we're talking about here, but the content is very interesting. We've registered gNewBuntu.org for an ideologically pure derivative, have had some discussion with RMS about this. He's supportive of the idea, but not the name. We may go ahead with the name as it is, since I think it perfectly captures the link to both projects. The idea would be to set up that derivative to include only stuff that's FSF blessed, even if the FSF doesn't bless the name of the aggregation. If anyone is keen to work on that, please let me know. It would require some knowledge of the core tools of managing a derivative. The Ubuntu guys may or may not be interested in helping out. They already work on a core that is FSF blessed, so this might save them a lot of work. This was a distro that, even though it kind of sounds similar to Ubuntu, actually started 4 years earlier. This was the very first distro that was blessed by the FSF, and at the time, is what Stallman was running. Now, this is the really fun thing about gNewBuntu. We can do a domain lookup and see who owns the domain. Now, it says it's registered under a registrar called Mark Monitor. That doesn't really matter. It was registered on this date here in 2004. But more importantly, it is on Canonical's name servers, and it is still owned by Canonical. This domain is still active, and if we go to it right now, it redirects us to ubuntu.com. They still have it. And sadly, this is how the domain was always used. There are no funny archives from 2005, nothing like that. It has always just been a redirect, and it's always just been a redirect because they did eventually change the name. That first name change being Ubuntu-libre, and this is the wiki page. Ubuntu-libre derived from a proposal for an Ubuntu version called gNewBuntu, attempts to become an official version of Ubuntu that will protect user freedom by default. When a user installs default Ubuntu-libre system, they can be sure that only free software will be installed on his system during the installation and later while using the package manager for installing additional software. Ubuntu-libre doesn't try to prevent a user from installing proprietary software or adding package repositories for proprietary software, but the user has to explicitly break their own freedom by doing so. I would argue adding to their freedom, but it is what it is. So the use cases, you like Ubuntu technically, but you're concerned about your freedom. Or maybe you're a system administrator at an organization which has a commitment to use only free software. Or you run a system with high security requirements, allowing only software with source code available to be used. In short, this means that Ubuntu restricted and multiverse components will not be part of Ubuntu-libre default installation. Future goals will probably include work for filling the gaps left by removing restricted component, as the guarded freedom of Ubuntu-libre may attract some current users of the GNU operating system. Work enabling Ubuntu-libre user to choose between Herd and Linux. Even in 2005, there were some people that still thought that Herd was happening. is another possible future distinctive feature. However, it is not that easy and is probably not going to happen any day soon, or ever, because herd is a meme. Now, there was also some discussion regarding a logo. And this is where they ended up getting to. You know, it's a logo, and someone said, hey, I like the aggression. Someone else said, I don't like the aggression because this is not what Ubuntu and the FSF and the freedoms are about. We don't like aggressiveness. We like openness, receptivity, hope, and future. And this is not the logo the project ended up using. But it is kind of funny that this was one of the suggestions. Now, prior to its final name, Stallman on many occasions had already criticized Ubuntu for offering non-free software. This is not new for Ubuntu. It didn't start with the Amazon Unity lens. It didn't start with anything later on. It had been happening since Warty Warthog. And around the release of Ubuntu 7.04, Stallman did an interview with an outlet called Hardware Logic. At the time, they were a fairly popular tech outlet, but they went defunct in 2018. Now, this is a very interesting interview, but the main part I want to focus on is when he was asked about Ubuntu. It seems that GNU Linux systems have recently gained very large momentum as a desktop platform. Many see Ubuntu as a large factor in this. I wouldn't call it large momentum, but sure, it's quicker than it was before Ubuntu, due to its ease of use for the average user, especially if they're installing it for the first time in order to dual boot with a Microsoft system. Do you agree with this statement at all? Improving ease of use is important, but we must not focus on this to the point where we overlook ethical issues. Ubuntu recommends the installation of many non-free programs. Worse, it installs non-free drivers without even informing the user when it sees hardware that needs these drivers. I like how it puts needs in quotes. This is hardware that would not function without these drivers. Yes, it needs these drivers. To recommend using Ubuntu is to recommend use of non-free software. I recommend use of the gNewSense distribution, which is based on Ubuntu, but is completely free. It is just as easy to use. On your website, you say that you use the Ubuntu GNU Linux distribution. As one of the key developers of the GNU operating system, how do you find it helpful to use a distribution at all, as opposed to building the entire system from scratch? I have switched to gNewSense and corrected the website a few days ago. My very favorite line though, and this is going to really age the article if the ad you saw on the side hadn't already done so, he was asked about what desktop environment he uses. He said, I choose GNOME because it's the GNU desktop. KDE is also a free desktop. I have never used it, but now that it's free software, I have nothing against it. I'm not familiar with Enlightenment or XFCE. If you didn't know, GNOME originally was a GNU project. It being called the GNU Object Model Environment wasn't just a name, it was a GNU project. It's not anymore, even though they refused to stop listing it until 2021, but that's a whole nother story. Now, gNewSense was also a very, very new project at the time, only starting in 2006. And I would not be surprised if it started because of some of the discussion from Mark Shuttleworth. He wanted to make that free software version of Ubuntu. Someone said, okay, I'm gonna do it myself, you're taking way too long. Also back then, the FSF had a lot more resources than they do now, and this project was actually run in collaboration with the FSF. But that didn't help it stick around for that long. The project ended up going dormant in 2009. Then 3 years later, had another release in 2012, then another release in 2013, and then a final release in 2016. Now, in 2019, the website looked like this. gNewSense is a fully free software GNU Linux distribution based on Debian GNU Linux. Free software, blah, 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 you know what free software is. As of 2019, gNewSense has not released in several years, but active development has restarted. Please read next steps for gNewSense to see where the project is headed, including merging with the Skeleton GNU Linux project. And there's nothing that really happened again on the gNewSense website. So, well, nothing involving the actual project, because something did happen there. So in 2021, it started looking like this. And I'm not touching anything, but it redirects over to Pure OS. I don't know what was going on at the time, but now all it does is redirects to that list we saw in the beginning, the free software distributions. Anyway, back to the Ubuntu stuff. Here we have the announcement for 7.10 Gutsy Gibbon, and along with this, we get some free software stuff. The Gibbon won the G-Race to be our engineering mascot for this next release, but it was a close run. We very much wanted to honour the tremendous contributions of the GNU project to free software by awarding the role to the glossy GNU. This prompted an intense internal debate about trademarks, at which both the Fiery Fox and the Icy Weasel were heard. In the end, however, the judge, jury, and electioner, that would be me, took a liking to the Gibbon's extraordinary reach, and the Gibbon won outright. The glossy GNU will nonetheless play a role in the next release, because Ubuntu 7.10 will feature a new flavor, as yet unnamed, which takes an ultra-orthodox view of licensing. No firmware, drivers, imagery, sounds, applications, or other content which do not include full source materials and come with full rights of modification, remixing, and redistribution. There should be no more conservative home for those who demand a super strict interpretation of the free software. This work will be done in collaboration with the folks behind gNewSense, which in a sense would make gNewSense an official flavor, but not really, and we'll get to why in just a bit. So it's not gNubuntu, it's not Ubuntu-libre. What name did they go with? That was Gobuntu. Not to be confused with Gobuntu, which is the internal Google fork of Ubuntu. This is the free software version. And this is the official logo they went with. It's a functional logo. I wouldn't say it's a great logo, but it's a logo. And this is the official listing on Ubuntu's website, and archive.org is being very slow. Why would I want to use Gobuntu? If you're looking to build a free software distribution based off of Ubuntu, or you wish to use an operating system that only provides you with truly free software and content, you should consider Gobuntu. Please note that because running Gobuntu on most laptops and many desktops will be difficult, Gobuntu is intended for experienced Linux enthusiasts at this time. And honestly, until the end of time, you realistically cannot run most free software distros on modern hardware unless you're willing to accept a lot of things just not working. Now here's the problem. When you try to play this ideological purity game, you are going to get purity tested. And they very quickly ran into problems where they weren't completely free as defined by the FSF. They were shipping Firefox and Thunderbird, which had trademark restrictions with their logos. Also, YouTube at the time required the Flash plugin, so if you visited the website, it would prompt you to install it. Now, there was GNU Ganache, which technically would work, but it didn't automatically suggest you install that one instead. Then there were the potential issues with various software patents where some countries just don't care about patents at all, others take them very seriously, so it was unclear whether these things should even be addressed in the first place. Even GNU Ganache, which, because of all the Flash stuff, could have still been a problem. Now, as you can see here, these problems are known about, and these problems could be addressed, like they are addressed in pretty much any modern free software distro by just effectively shipping a broken distro. Like, that's what a free software distro basically amounts to. But when I mentioned that this project was very short-lived, I really mean it was short-lived. So, 8.04 rolled around, and Jono Bacon put out an email on the mailing list. That being this one here. Changes to Gobuntu. Hi all. The Gobuntu development team would like to announce that after the 8.04 release of Gobuntu, the project will aim to merge many of the Gobuntu changes into mainline Ubuntu, such as our free software only installer option, which only installs software considered free by the Free Software Foundation's definition of software freedom. This installer option now obviates the need for a separate derivative project, and in the interest of reducing the workload of Ubuntu core developers, the Gobuntu project will instead focus on merging as many changes as possible into mainline Ubuntu. Basically, it being a separate flavor was over. Done. Project dead. But a lot of the things they learnt ended up making their way into mainline Ubuntu. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe this option exists in the modern Ubuntu installer. Previously, it was like hidden in a weird drop-down menu, but it definitely was there. If it is there, let me know. Also, there was this very long related thread called the present and the future. What I've been trying to say is that working together with Ubuntu seems to be more important for Gobuntu than instant freedom. Instant freedom is a gNewSense goal. Gobuntu consists of Ubuntu main and universe components. It is thus a goal of Gobuntu to make sure main and universe components of Ubuntu contain only free software. As a result, Gobuntu will become free. However, they have to take part in Ubuntu community and drive things the correct way. They may not go modify original Linux source package from kernel.org only because it suits the goal of Gobuntu. They will at least have to work with the Ubuntu kernel team, and as I said earlier, it may be preferable to get those things right in corresponding upstreams, in this case, kernel.org. Basically, if Gobuntu wants to exist, it has to make Ubuntu fit what it wants to do, rather than just being a free software distro from the start. And then Mark Shuttleworth responded. The current and future thread on this list has got me thinking. Perhaps we really are on the wrong track, that the only way to meet the needs of the gNewSense folks is to have completely different source packages to Ubuntu. If that is the case, then I think it would be better to channel the energy from Gobuntu into gNewSense. I had hoped to see more participation and collaboration around Gobuntu because of the benefits of keeping up with the standard Ubuntu, regular releases, security updates, etc. However, it seems the audience for a platform like this is willing to accept infrequent releases and less maintenance in return for a platform which can be modified more radically. That's okay, it's just a bit unexpected. I thought we could get the best of both worlds with 6-monthly releases of something that excluded binary packages that were controversial in the eyes of the FSF, but retained access to everything else in Ubuntu. I'm not sure that the current level of activity in Gobuntu warrants the division of attention it creates, either for folks who are dedicated to Ubuntu primarily, or to folks who are interested in gNewSense. I would like us to have a good relationship with the gNewSense folks because I do think their values and views are important, and I would like Ubuntu to be a useful starting point for them. But perhaps Gobuntu isn't the best way to achieve that. So I would like to hear from the gNewSense guys how they would like to be involved in Ubuntu to help ensure that Ubuntu is a useful starting point for their important work. If Gobuntu is not the best way to achieve that, then I think we should stop working on it and encourage folks who want that to focus their efforts on gNewSense, while at the same time figuring out how Ubuntu can be more useful for gNewSense. And as of Ubuntu 8.04.1, the project was officially abandoned. So, let me know, did you ever try out Gobuntu when it was a thing? Did you try out gNewSense back when that was developed? And maybe you run a free software distro now, or do you just run a regular distro? Let me know what you use in the comment section down below. And if you like the video, go like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon subscribes LiberaPay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and go away.